The honourable member for London North Centre.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity to rise today in this House in support of Bill C-7. In my riding of London North Centre, we have the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Ontario headquarters as well as the RCMP London, Ontario detachment. Combined, these two offices have approximately 165 regular members. Many of these individuals are my constituents, I'm proud to say. I'm also very proud of the work these men and women do in keeping Canadians safe every single day, Madam Speaker. With that in mind, it is an honour to be part of this debate and take a stand on behalf of these men and women, the members and reservists of the RCMP. The bill before us today would uphold the constitutionally guaranteed freedom of RCMP members and reservists to engage in meaningful collective bargaining. I emphasize that point. Madam Speaker, collective bargaining is a right that other police officers in Canada have enjoyed for many years, but it is a right that has been denied to the members and reservists of the RCMP, individuals who over the last 143 years, Madam Speaker, have contributed so much to our proud, strong, and free nation. This bill would rectify that issue. This bill is a clear and reasoned response to the Supreme Court ruling of January 16th, 2015. The Court affirmed in that decision that Section 2D of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and I quote, protects a meaningful process of collective bargaining that provides employees with a degree of choice and independence sufficient to enable them to determine and pursue their collective interests. The Court also determined that, and I quote again, the current labour relations regime denies RCMP members that choice and imposes onto them a scheme that does not permit them to identify and advance their workplace concerns free from management's influence. It is therefore my pleasure to support this bill today, a bill that provides RCMP members and reservists with freedom of choice and independence from management while still recognizing their unique operational reality. Madam Speaker, the bill in question is a product of careful consideration of the results of consultations with key stakeholders. The first with regular members of the RCMP, and the second with provinces, territories, and municipalities who have policing agreements with the RCMP. Bill C-7 has a number of important features, and I will now go over those briefly. It provides for independent, binding arbitration, Madam Speaker, as the dispute resolution process for bargaining impasses. Consistent with other police forces across this country, the members of the RCMP bargaining unit would not be permitted to strike. This was the strong preference of those who participated in the online consultation. The bill would also provide for a single national bargaining unit composed solely of RCMP members appointed to a rank and reservists. And the RCMP bargaining agent, should one be certified, would have as its primary mandate the representation of RCMP members. Again, regular members showed clear support for these provisions. The bill also excludes officers appointed to the ranks of inspector and above from representation. And finally, the Public Service Labour Relations and Employment Board would be the administrative tribunal for collective bargaining matters related to the RCMP bargaining units, as well as grievances related to a collective agreement. Madam Speaker, the bill before us today is consistent with our government's efforts to restore fair and balanced labour laws in this country. Take, for instance, Bill C-5, which would repeal Division 20 of Bill C-59, the 2015 Budget Implementation Bill, tabled last April by the previous government. It gave the government the authority to unilaterally override the collective bargaining process and impose a new sick leave system onto the public service. Madam Speaker, the Public Service Relations Act was originally passed in 1967 to give public servants the right to unionize and bargain collectively. It is fundamental to ensuring collaborative efforts between the parties and to improving the ability of the public service to serve and protect the public interest. Madam Speaker, I have also many public service employees in my riding of London North Centre, and in fact, I had the privilege of meeting with some of their leadership last week. and they made their voices heard. The actions of the previous government to unilaterally impose a new sick leave system while ignoring the collective bargaining process were unfortunate and disrespectful. Madam Speaker, our government made it clear that we would not be party to an approach that disregards the process of negotiation between an employer and a group of employees aimed at reaching agreements on the terms and conditions of employment. By repealing those provisions in Bill C-59, we are demonstrating our respect for the collective bargaining process. Madam Speaker, we believe in collective bargaining, and the bill before us today honors our belief in this right. Madam Speaker, we also believe in fair and balanced labour relations. Yet over the last few years, many fundamental labour rights have been rolled back. Just look at Bill C-377 and 525. That would both would have changed how unions could be certified and decertified, and would place new financial reporting requirements onto them. These bills were passed without the traditional employer, union, and government consultation process used for labour relations law reform. The result has been what? The result has been that it is now more difficult for unions and the employer to bargain collectively in good faith, Madam Speaker. We need instead to ensure that workers can organize freely, bargain collectively in good faith, and work in safe environments. To that end, the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Labour has also introduced legislation to repeal, as you know, Bill C-377 and 525. Bill C-4 restores the procedures for the certification and the revocation of certification of bargaining agents that existed prior to June 16, 2015. And Bill C-4 also amends the Income Tax Act to remove the unnecessary requirements on labour organizations and labour trusts for the public reporting of financial information. As honourable members are well aware, legislation is already in place to ensure that unions make such financial information available. Section 110 of the Canada Labour Code, for instance, requires unions to provide financial statements to their members upon request and free of charge, rendering these additional reporting requirements unnecessary. Madam Speaker, the bill before us today is very much in keeping with our belief in fair and balanced labour relations. Engaging in collective bargaining is a right long since exercised by all other police forces in Canada. The bill would respect that right while recognizing the particular circumstances of the RCMP as a national police force. Madam Speaker, it's time for us to give RCMP members and reservists the respect that they are due. I again would like to thank those members and reservists of the RCMP for their dedicated service to our country. I am proud to have such a strong RCMP presence in my riding of London North Centre, and I commend them for going to work each and every day with the safety of all Canadians and all Londoners at the forefront of their minds. To that end, Madam Speaker, I ask all members to show their support for members and reservists of the RCMP by voting in favour of this bill. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires?
Sorry, I just need my glasses here.
The honourable member for... just 1 second. Central Okanagan, Smithley Nicola.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for his speech. Certainly, there are many things in this bill, particularly support for RCMP, and recognizing inherent rights. I think that's an important part of this discussion. But I do want to just raise a question and a concern. I've heard from mayors, both from large city mayors and small in my riding, concerns about the taxpayers' ability to pay for emergency programming. This is usually in relationship to fire departments and whatnot, because the collective bargaining process often, and recognizes that these are very dangerous roles, often gives them quite, increases more than the rate of inflation, Madam Speaker. What I'm asking the members just to hear what his thoughts are, because British Columbia is one of the provinces that actually contracts from the RCMP directly, And one of the things I'm concerned of, and these mayors have raised, is that if the emergency budgets continue to rise in places like British Columbia, what will that do to rural policing? And what will that do to the RCMP in provinces like British Columbia? Again, I have no answers, Madam Speaker. I'm just simply asking the members' thoughts.
The honourable member for London North Centre.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the question. The Liberal Party has a record throughout its history of fiscal responsibility. And as for the concerns about ability to pay and the ability of this government to take into account costs that the honourable member raises, I simply point to the fact that under the Liberal Party, Canada has prospered indeed in great ways in terms of financial management. As far as collective bargaining goes, we have to pay attention to it. It is a fundamental issue in any democracy, and we will continue to consult throughout this process with stakeholders throughout this country, whether it's municipalities, provinces, and certainly the RCMP. This is a party that believes in consultation, that respected consultation when it came to this particular bill, and I would simply answer the question in that way, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
I'd like to thank the honourable member. Indeed, it's encouraging to see that the new Liberal government is supporting collective bargaining. What is unfortunate is they're not really supporting true collective bargaining. You are not in this legislation extending what are the usual rights, which is to include collective bargaining on harassment, staffing, on discipline. Now, it is very clear that the workers themselves, Mounted Police Professional Association of Canada, specifically have requested that at the bargaining table to be able to deal with disciplinary measures and allocation of resources. Can the members speak to why on earth they are reducing the actual rights of collective bargaining to RCMP, and can they tell us what issues on harassment have to do with security?
The honourable member for London North Centre.
Madam Speaker, the primary intent of the bill is to respond to the Supreme Court decision of 2015. That's what the bill is about. We've recognized the importance of the Supreme Court decision, and we are acting in that regard. When the Supreme Court speaks, this House has a duty to listen, and this is what this bill is intending to achieve. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable parliamentary secretary to the Minister of the Treasury Board.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate the comments of the member from London North Centre about respect for the work of the RCMP, about respect for their unique and particular circumstances of Canada's National Police. He talked about fair labour relations, the respectful process and content of this legislation. Given that he has RCMP headquarters and a detachment in his riding, could he speak a bit more about the individual women and men of the RCMP and why they are so deserving of the respect of this House through this legislation?
The honourable member for London North Centre.
Madam Speaker, public safety has to be at the very core of what any government promotes, and respecting the RCMP speaks to that. It is a moment of pride, I think, for anyone in this House when we have the ability to stand up and recognize officers who are, every day putting their lives on the line for our safety. And so when the honourable member asks about my experience and my feeling with respect to the RCMP being headquartered in my riding, at least the Ontario division, that brings me incredible pride. I know many of these members. I've had the opportunity to chat with them about issues relating to the matters we're discussing here in this House today. And I know that they are looking forward to changes that respect and reflect what the Supreme Court has asked us to do. And that's what we're doing here today. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Comments, questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Cariboo Prince George.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And just a point of clarity, earlier the member opposite failed to answer the question from my honourable member from Central Okanagan, Malcolm Nicola. And I too also asked the same question earlier on. This is neither a comment for or against the unionization of the RCMP or a comment against or for the Liberals' ability to balance budgets. The question merely is in going forward, has this government considered the financial ramifications on municipalities from coast to coast or in the 8 provinces that this will have, whether in this budget or future budgets? Has that been taken into account?
The honourable member for London North Centre.
Madam Speaker, I find it rather puzzling that the members opposite in the Conservative Party would raise concerns now about municipalities sympathetically. Madam Speaker, under the previous government, we had a decade of federal, provincial, municipal relations that leaves its budget day, so I'll be positive, left a lot to be desired, Madam Speaker. And so going forward, I know that consultation will be at the core of what we do as a government. We take that seriously. Of course, we care about the plight of municipalities, of provinces, and of the RCMP in that process. Thank you very much.
I just want to remind members that when somebody has the floor, to be respectful and let that person speak. So questions and comments, questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Mont Royal.
Mr. Speaker, and I want to congratulate my colleague from London North Centre for his excellent speech. I wanted to also salute the RCMP, and I know all of us on this side of the House and throughout the House really care about the men and women of the RCMP, and whatever our perspectives are on this law and the flaws or merits to it, we all agree that the RCMP does a great job. So I would like to ask the honourable member, can he talk to us a little bit philosophically about the importance of collective bargaining and why it is so important to bring the right of collective bargaining to the RCMP in response to the Supreme Court judgment?
Honourable member for London North Centre.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Collective bargaining is at the core of any democracy. Any democracy will be reflective of particular interests and concerns that often diverge. And therefore, if we don't respect a collective bargaining process in any labour relations realm, then we're not living up to that recognition. The recognition that diverging interests, when not taken into account, can lead us astray as a society. And we have to get back onto a path of respecting the fact that we all have a particular stake in this society, that we need to be on the same page, and we can move towards that through collective bargaining. It's an enshrined principle in any democracy, and I'm glad that this government is taking its cue from the Supreme Court of Canada in proposing this particular piece of legislation.
Questions and comments, questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I certainly appreciate what the member has said about making sure that everyone is on side and supportive. Before I get to my question, I just want to make a comment on something he said earlier about the previous government not respecting municipalities, not caring for them. Madam Speaker, when the Liberals were in power for 13 long years, they only provided $1.5 billion to British Columbia in infrastructure funding. Over the 8 years that we were in power, within 8 years, Madam Speaker, of the almost 9 or 10 years we were in power, we gave British Columbia $4.5 billion, tripling what the previous government had done in less the time. The question I ask, has this member respected municipalities by asking stakeholders, like municipalities, on their opinion on this bill?
Answer from the member for London North Centre.
Madam Speaker, consultation is ongoing. And what I would say is that as far as the record of the previous government goes, I have a number, $150 billion in debt. That I rest my point on that, Madam Speaker.
I just want